Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I recently shot a video where I interviewed Ed Bolian of VinWiki and had the video ready to upload it, went to upload it, and YouTube didn't like the length of it, I think. It was too long. Now, I've shot videos that long before and uploaded them without problem, but for whatever reason, I've been foiled by YouTube. So I've decided to cut the video in half. One part will be the first half, the second part will be the second half. So here we go. Part one. This is a very exciting moment because I am sitting with my dear friend Ed Bolian of VinWiki. Good to see you, Ed.
Thanks for coming.
Hey,
great stories.
Thanks for being down here. I've shot videos with Ed on a previous occasion, and we've been working for a while trying to get together a second occasion. We finally did it. We knocked out a couple videos, so people have that to look forward to on your channel going forward. And I insisted and said, well, if I'm coming down here and I'm going to be doing more videos for you, I insist that you sit for one with me. And of course, that involved us moving furniture, which, as a video creator, I hate moving furniture, but
we made it work. We have everything mapped out in here. There's some spray paint on the floor to know exactly where the chairs go normally.
Yes, so someone walking into this room who's a neat freak is going to look down and go, somebody spray painted the floor. But that's exactly what I've done because you want the chair in the exact same space because it saves you time.
And the masking tape kept peeling up.
Yes, yes. So what I want to talk to you about is car culture. Car culture, because your channel's all about the cars. I talk a lot about cars and the law, and I'm fascinated by cars. I've written a couple car books. And the real interesting thing to me as I talk to people around the country is how different car culture is. So I grew up in Detroit. Detroit has automotive news headlining the papers and the evening news, and on the radio around the clock. It's the biggest industry in town. Mm-hmm. I assume that car culture isn't that like front of mind in Atlanta.
For sure. I mean, Atlanta has a traffic culture, I think, is our automotive culture here. But I think you're exactly right. And I think as you tell your stories of your upbringing and the ways that you fell in love with cars, the cars that you fell in love with, it is centered around this Motor City idea of the big three, of their halo products, and of what kind of impression that had on you. And for me, it's not different in terms of when those impressions were so valuable, but it is different in what those impressions were, because mine were mostly through media, whether it was reading Road and Track or Car and Driver or watching Top Gear or playing Gran Turismo. You know, I turned 40 this year, and most people my age are most heavily impacted by the DuPont Registry, MTV Cribs, Gran Turismo, Top Gear, kind of 2000 to 2010 heyday of the supercar. And so that's why my garage is full of terrible examples of really cool supercars, because that is what I fell in love with.
The DuPont Registry, that just brought flashbacks. That really did. But so here's the thing. It was so important for me to get my driver's license that the day I turned 16, I went to Secretary of State's office and got my license. I took the day off from school to get my driver's license. I got my learner's permit at 15, the earliest I could get it. I had my learner's permit long before anybody else. But nowadays I talk to kids and they're like, I haven't got a license. I don't know if I need one. I can Uber everywhere. How are you about getting your driver's license?
Oh, just that eager, except I believe my 16th birthday was on a Sunday. And so I couldn't get it that day, and it killed me that I had to wait. And I think my parents may wait until after school that Monday to get it. But it was as urgently as it possibly could be.
So we can blame that on your parents.
That's it. Yeah. That's it for that massive delay in my freedom.
Okay. First car I got to drive on a regular basis, a 1974 green Gremlin. Top that.
Well, the first car that I got to drive regularly was a hand-me-down Land Rover Discovery. My father had bought it new, put about 180,000 miles on it, which is not the peak moment of reliability in those early Discoveries' life, but I loved it. It was always covered in mud, always driven everywhere, and I never really cleaned it, so wherever I'd park, the mud from the most recent escapade would just settle into the spot, so I'd always know. But it was a wonderful car.
So your goofing off, was it often off-road?
Oh, yes.
Yes. See, here's the thing. I had brothers who had trucks. I never got into the off-roading so much, but we did spend a lot of time cruising. Woodward Avenue is famous for cruising. It's a road that runs from Detroit out towards the suburbs, and there's a section of it where seemingly every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I was out there just doing loops in my car. But that wasn't with the Gremlin. The first cool car I owned was a 1969 Dodge Charger, We had the 383, and I did treat it like the gas pedal was an on-off switch. What was the first cool car you got to drive?
So fortunately, growing up in Georgia and getting decent grades, college was free. And so I had gotten enough scholarships, both through what was available through the state and other things, that my parents had been willing to help pay for college, but because that was unnecessary, they actually bought me a car, since my mom had not recognized the coolant temperature gauge when she drove the Land Rover at one point, and it exploded. And so they bought me an unbelievable car. It was a 2000 B5 Audi S4. And it had actually had some really cool bolt-on modifications that really impacted the reliability of the vehicle, but made it very, very fast. And so I got that, I guess I would have been, it was a few years later, so I was 18, 19 years old, and I loved it. It was such a great car to drive. I kind of think of that as like my first, like you do, the first real car that you loved.
Right.
And I kept it for a few years and eventually sold it to become the down payment on my first Lamborghini while I was in college in 2006, when you could just tell banks how much money you thought you made, and they would believe you and give you stated income loans for exotic cars as a college student. And
so you got your first Lamborghini
at 20.
At 20 as a college student.
Without any money to make the first payment. And so I immediately started the rental company to rent it out and floated it along for quite some time.
Okay.
I got a Ferrari the next year and another Ferrari the year after that, and just kind of built up a small rental fleet, but was able to make a bit of a business out of it. I had no idea what I was doing, and it was sloppy and risky, but it went all right. And I made some money, but to be honest, what it really did is it just built up the most rock star car credit you'd ever seen.
Okay.
Because I made so many payments for so long on so many cars that it looked like, man, this guy must be rolling in money.
Right.
But it turned out I was ending every month with a few dollars left.
So I had occasion, I worked at a gas station, to change the oil in my own cars, primarily because I was a poor kid and the jobs I had didn't pay that well for a little while. And so I did a lot of oil changes at the gas station, but also in my own driveway. I put in starter motors, I've put in water pumps, I've replaced radiators, valve covers, intake manifolds, and a few other things. Did you ever get to do that with these vehicles you owned, or was that, you skipped that?
They were a little overly electronic, and so certainly, fluids and batteries and stuff like that were easy, I was capable of. And I didn't grow up in an automotive household.
Okay.
My parents appreciated decent cars, but they would buy them and just, dealer maintain them and drive them 250,000 miles into the ground, or earlier in some cases. But so I did not experience that as a young child in the garage with my dad wrenching on stuff.
Okay.
And so most of my obsession with cars was based much more on driving them. And so now I do considerably more, even though now they've gotten so much more complicated that I've got, better, much more qualified people to help maintain the value in these things. But, I think now I'm at a position where what do I instill as the automotive enthusiasm for my son? Because I've got a 10-year-old son, and so I let him start driving when he was 8. The first car he ever drove was my Lamborghini Murcielago SV.
Well, that's something.
It was the only paddle shift car I had, and he didn't know how to operate a clutch at that point.
Okay.
So we would just go to his school and drive around the bus loop in this car,
Okay.
and he's sitting on pillows and shifting and loving it. So 2 years later, now that he's 10, I started teaching him how to drive a stick with the most recent Car Trek car. And we had rented a racetrack for a birthday party that I had with some friends, and he got to drive on track in a manual for the first time at 10. So I'm trying to, grow him up right, but he's having a blast. He's doing great.
Okay, I have to ask you a question then. Because I grew up in Detroit, there was a strong prejudice against buying or owning foreign cars. Now, every time I mention this on YouTube, I get pushback from people say, Steve, Japanese car companies build cars in America, and American car companies build cars in Canada. See, I'm talking about the badges. Ford, GM, and Chrysler are the big three. That always will be. I don't care what Chrysler calls themselves, they're Chrysler.
Yes.
Okay, GM went bankrupt, they're still GM. I've owned nothing but American cars my entire life. Have you ever owned an American car?
Once I had a Cadillac Fleetwood limousine that we ran a cannonball in.
Oh,
Yes,
okay. How'd that work out for you?
Terribly. Comfortably, but terribly.
Did it make it?
Eventually. It had a very sporadic fuel gauge and very intermittent consumption of fuel. And so we ran out of gas a few times. But it did make it. It required considerable rehabilitation prior to departure.
Okay.
But we had prepped it in the right way. Have I owned any other American cars?
But when you describe a race and say the time is eventually. I assume that you guys didn't set any records.
That was not a record-setting mission. No, there was actually John Harrison, who was one of the guys that ran the last competitive official cannonball in 1979. Was in a Lotus that he and his brother had, and they crashed it in Ohio, and so they did not finish. And he's always been kind of a friend of the modern pursuit of the cannonball craft, and he had never made it all the way across. And so he was up in age and having some health issues, and so John Ficarra and I had invited him along. Said, "Hey, do you want to go?" And he said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And so we needed something that had some space to spread out, be comfortable, let him sleep as much as he wanted. And so the limousine was perfect for that.
Right.
But he did like the stint. We did the northern route through 80, so coming down through Utah and stuff, he was just flying at the limit of this maybe 108 mile an hour limousine. But he was, smiling ear to ear, and we were all just thrilled he could do it.
Wow. Well, as an attorney, I represent a lot of people who get traffic tickets. They can be speeding tickets or reckless driving or running stop signs or all manner of traffic infractions. And the first ticket I ever got, I was driving to school and I was late. And I was taking a shortcut because a friend of mine had called, I'm being a nice guy.
You're right.
A friend of mine called me and said, "Steve, I need a jump start." So I threw my brother's jumper cables in my trunk, and I'm zooming over to my friend's house. I'm zooming through a neighborhood, and lo and behold, there's a police officer with a radar gun who caught me doing, he says, more than 10 over. Who am I to argue? I just paid the ticket. Oof. But I very valuable and expensive lesson at the age of 17. Have you ever gotten a ticket? And if so, what was the first one you got that you can tell us about?
Steve, how many stars are there in the sky?
That's why I'm limiting you to the first one, because that's probably more memorable.
Yeah, I would think so, but there's been so many since then that I don't know. I got a bunch, but I would generally, go do the community service, do the driving school, and all the standard stuff. Back then it was easier. You could just talk to the solicitor and they didn't immediately hate you. Maybe that's my fault. The demeanor has changed. I don't know. The worst one I ever got was I was on a rally in a 430 Scuderia, and we were in Arkansas, which I didn't realize. You don't think like Arkansas is going to be like a terrible place to speed. It is.
I would have thought so. I would have guessed
you would
that.
have thought that.
I've seen enough movies set in the 70s with the sheriff walking up, going, "Where are you going in such a hurry, boy?"
Yeah, and it was kind of that, except I guess what had happened is it was me and another Ferrari and a Porsche, and we had gone around the truck, not that fast, but I guess we'd been clocked by a cop going in the other direction who had radioed to some cops that were further up the road. Ooh. And that dynamic isn't really what you're looking for. And so this guy, who was very young and very new to the profession, had been told, like, "Hey, get ready. You're about to have to chase these Ferraris." And of course, we saw him. We'd slowed down. We pulled over immediately, and it was no big deal. But he was so amped up that he was fully drawn up, ready. I mean, it was a felony level stop.
Start writing tickets.
And so he's like, hands on the wheel. Get out of the car. You want me to turn it off? Yeah, I guess turn it off with your hands. How am I? And so we're opening from the outside and all the stuff, and he handcuffs us all.
Oh, wow.
And he's, sweating, shaking, all the stuff. And I'm like, can we just put that down while you are in this? Okay, whatever. Everybody got to die some way. Right. And so he gets us, and we get reckless driving tickets, which we ultimately were able to use. I'll plug the ticket clinic. Unless if you're not going to use him where he's licensed, the ticket clinic can help you get out of a ticket no matter where it happens.
Wow.
But,
but they wrote you for reckless.
They did, but as you've discussed, there's and other lawyers that have been here have talked about, just speed isn't enough to constitute reckless driving in most states. Now, some states have a speed threshold for
above
reckless
25
driving.
over.
Exactly. Yeah. But Arkansas doesn't. Like, there has to be an additional exhibition of speed or activity that constitutes it being dangerous to other people.
Right.
And since it was just us and it was in a relatively open bit of interstate, they had no proof of that. And so it was an expensive one to fight, but we got it handled.
Okay. When I was a young man, I'm talking about a senior in high school and then maybe a year after, before I went off to college and so on, I spent a lot of time out apparently just cruising a section of Woodward Avenue, hours on end, burning gas for no reason. And at that time, it cost about $1 a gallon, which is crazy for us.
Yep.
But there were a couple ice cream stands, and we'd stop at the ice cream stand to get ice cream and stand around and talk for an hour or two, then jump in the car and drive down to the other ice cream stand. A lot of ice cream and gasoline was where I was spending my money on. Did you have any time frames where you're like just cruising around, hanging out, and talking about cars, just driving around, or did it evolve straight into let's get across America as fast as possible?
Well, that was always kind of the goal in the back of my mind. But no, I mean, I think there is something for car enthusiasts that is very meditative about driving.
Yeah.
And for me, especially in college, where you're still trying to figure out your direction in life, what you really want to do, what you're being forced to do, and kind of the intersection of all of that.
Right.
My love of cars and my hope to one day do something professionally in the automotive world was kind of that North Star career-wise.
Okay.
And so when it would all get to be too much, and I'd struggle with insomnia and stuff like that, in Atlanta, we have a ring road around the city called I-285.
Okay.
And it's 62 miles, and I would just go drive laps around the whole city.
Okay.
And, some days counterclockwise, some the other way.
It's like 100 kilometers.
Exactly, right?
Wow.
Exactly 100 kilometers, just coincidentally. So I would do that often, and there's always different construction because it's Atlanta, and there's always different truck traffic and things like that. But you get to see the city from all sides, and it's to me eventually after I got home I would sleep.
Wow. Okay. And that is where we'll end part 1. Up next, part 2.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Be happy in the moment. That is enough.